voice of the Duke Blue Devils, Mr. Bob Harris. So, Mr. Harris, thanks for being with us. We really appreciate it on your busy Friday afternoon. Thanks again, though.
Well, thankfully, it's not as busy as most Friday afternoons have been this winter, and even in the fall, because, this week Duke has the open weekend, so I don't have a game. The only thing I've got to do tomorrow is go watch the spring football game. Duke started very early, and they're going to have the spring game tomorrow, so that's a little bit unusual, but, it's a good time of the year.
Right, it really is with the spring football starting, and obviously basketball getting into crunch time here with about a week left. But just talk about it. Have you ever seen anything like with the Duke with the 4 games in 6 days other than tournament play? And have you ever seen the Duke North Carolina game delayed because of something like that?
We have never had any postponements of games that I know of as far as basketball is concerned. Football, there was a postponement of a Saturday game right after 9/11. And that was because they were still, having the problems with the no-fly for the planes. But as far as basketball, no, never a postponement. And it was so very unusual because I had driven from my house to the Cameron Indoor Stadium, which is about 8 miles, and it had gotten to where it was kind of slick and slippery. And I left about 3:30 to go down there because I figured if I'm with the team, I'm okay. If they're there, I get there to the arena. If they're in the ditch, I'm in the ditch with them. They're not going to be there without me. So I thought that was best. But then, when they postponed it, Coach and I did a couple of radio shows, and I had a little something to eat with the team and the coaches. And then I drove across the street to the Washington Duke Hotel and spent the night there. I couldn't even get back home, just 8 miles. That's how bad it was. But, things like that come along. You got to make adjustments, and thankfully both teams had about the same. I think Carolina had one more day to prepare than Duke did. But, 5 games in 11 days is preposterous in basketball. And it's never happened before. Even in tournament time, you might play 3 games in 3 days in the ACC, but you only play 2 games in 3 days in the NCAAs, no matter which level you get to. So this was a very, very unusual situation, but I thought the kids handled it extremely well. When you have to go on the road a couple of times and then you play, a couple of very strong teams at home. Maryland played a terrific game against Duke, and then, you go to Chapel Hill, lose that game over there, which is not all that uncommon, and then come back home 2 days later, about 48 hours later, and you're playing the number 1 team in the country, and turned around by Georgia and beat them. And then you got off. Well, you didn't get off. You played. You practiced Sunday and Monday, and then played on Tuesday. But now, from that Tuesday night game earlier in this week until our next game, which will be next Wednesday at Wake Forest, that's an 8-day break, which is very good for these guys and getting them ready to head down the stretch of these last 2 games before the ACC tournament, and then get ready to go over there and see what happens in the big event.
Right. Well, speaking of those the game last Thursday night with North Carolina and Duke, and then Saturday versus Syracuse, have you ever seen anything like what the reaction Jim Boeheim had running out there on the court? Have you ever seen, in 36 years plus a broadcast, have you ever seen anything quite like that?
Not at all. I've seen coaches get thrown out of games. Gary Williams got thrown out early in the first half of the game at Duke. I think it was in the first 5 minutes of the game. He got 2 technicals and ended up having to sit by himself in the locker room for the first half. He got somebody to go get him a radio from an office in Cameron, and he listened to our broadcast the entire second half. We go up there 4 weeks later, and he comes down to our broadcast area after he finishes with his pregame show with Johnny Holiday, and he looks me straight in the eye and said, "I just want you to know I had to listen to you the whole last half of our game down in Durham after I got tossed." I looked at him, I said, "Oh?" He looked at me and says, "You're pretty dadgum good." And I thought, oh boy. And he said, "No," he said, "You treated us better than anybody I've ever heard about and gave us our due." But that was the earliest ejection I've ever heard. Seth Greenberg got tossed at Carolina once, or at Duke once. And it seemed like there was another guy who got tossed at a Duke game, but nothing nothing as demonstrative as what Jim Boeheim did. And he just lost it. And I don't think he actually realized what the situation was, because with him going all the way out on the floor like he did, I mean, that's an automatic technical right there. They hit him up with that before he got halfway to the official. And then he refused to go back to the bench. He stayed right in Tony Green's face, and Tony had no choice but tee him up a second time, and that's automatic ejection. And I think they said that was Boeheim's first ejection ever in college coaching. So, it was one of those things where if he had just even gotten the first technical, that's only 2 free throws, but he got 2, so that gave Duke 4 free throws, and Quinn Cook made 3 out of the 4, and then we get a foul and make 1 out of 2, so, that puts Duke up by 6 points instead of, it could have been very close. I mean, I'll tell you what, if Duke had missed the free throws, then, Syracuse comes down, they hit a 3, they win the ball game because it's a 2-point game at that point. But going back to what triggered it all was the possession by Syracuse, and if you go back a little bit further than the actual foul, you will see and there's pictures of it floating around, a still shot of Fair. The minute he gets the basketball, his right foot is halfway out of bounds. He's standing on the white stripe, the out-of-bounds line. It should have been a moot point anyway. They shouldn't have even had an attempt at a basket, but they did. And looking at the playback as I've seen it in real time, in slow motion, frame by frame, the official Tony Green made the exact right call, because Rodney Hood got in position. He had both feet on the floor, was not leaning, and Fair just came right into him and still had the ball in his hand for a second or so after contact before he released the ball. So it was no basket. That was not even an arguable point. But the fact that Boeheim thought that Rodney was moving, he was not. He was as stone still as a statue. So I thought that he let his emotions overcome him, and it cost his kids a chance to win a game.
Well, that certainly was a crazy moment. I mean, I haven't seen a coach freak out like that ever in my life, but like you said, it wasn't even that call that really cost Syracuse the game. It was Jim Boeheim getting the double technical and ejected, because Duke was only shooting, I think, in the 40s in terms of percentage of the free throw line. So it's realistic they may have missed both the free throws. But those were 2 great games, Duke-Syracuse. Obviously a little bit of controversy at the end in both of them. Where do you rank them in some of the best? Pardon me?
Sorry. I was going to say Rodney Hood was involved in both of them. He was going for a dunk, and he just got clobbered right in front of the official.
Yeah.
And he just, there were sounds of silence, as the old Simon and Garfunkel song used to go.
That's correct.
He didn't blow the whistle, and Duke lost the ball game on that play. But it was unbelievable with the 2 finishes. I've seen a lot of craziness in my life, in my career at Duke. I've been here 39 years now, and I haven't seen anything finish like the game in Durham did, with the coach getting ejected like that. But there have been some great ones, and I've had the privilege of doing the Leitner shot against Kentucky in '92, and 4 or 5 other buzzer beaters, and 4 national championships. So there's a lot of excitement, a lot of great games that I've had to look back at. This one is going to be it could be in the top 10. I'll have to sit down after the season's over and think back to the ones that I've done, and how the endings or the effect of the game turned, and where it stands in my career.
Right, and Mr. Harris, before we get into your the career a little bit more, talk a little bit about the job that obviously calling over 400 football games in 39 years at Duke that David Cutcliffe has done. I mean, you'd be better to talk about it than anybody else, but did you ever imagine them going to, besides the Steve Spurrier winning the ACC title, them going this year and the year they had?
It has been just an unbelievable 9 months, basically, or 8 months since football started back in August. But to do what they did, to win 8 straight games in the league, and 10 for the season, that's the most victories in Duke football history, and to beat the teams that they beat. I mean, they beat a very good NC State team. predicted to win the division prior to the season. They beat them. To go to Virginia Tech and win that game. Usually if a score is 13-10 in Blacksburg, I'll tell you what, the Hokies are going to win it, but not this time. And that just tells you that Duke was playing at a level that I think was equal to Virginia Tech and maybe just a tad better on that Saturday afternoon. And that's where the program has come from. And this is David's 6th year at Duke, and it's the longest tenure of any of the coaches that I've worked with, and he's the 9th head coach that I've worked with. But one thing that I think has really led to some of the Duke demise in the past has been the fact that out of those 9 head coaches in the 39 years, I've worked with 122 assistant coaches, and 5 of those were there twice, and 1 was there 3 times. So they've had a lot of turnover in the assistant coaching ranks, and I think that has been one problem. I know several years back we had one quarterback who he was a redshirt senior when he graduated, and he had worked for or played under 4 different offensive coordinators. That's basically 4 different styles of offense in 5 years. I mean, that's just unfair to the kids, but, that was the draw that they got. But thankfully, with the success that Duke has had, they got a really good recruiting year this year, and I think, the way they finished had a lot to do with it because I know some of the assistant coaches were telling me about, different areas that they recruit, that they were getting into houses that they couldn't even get a phone call into last year and the year before, simply because of the success and beating the teams that Duke beat. And, you hate for it to end kind of on a sour note with losing in the ACC championship game to Florida State. Nothing really wrong with losing to the national championship.
No, not at all. Had problems with that up here, too. So
I understand. But then go down and play an outstanding Texas A&M team. And
should have beat them.
Team, yeah, we should have. It was one of those games where it was so well played that neither team deserved to lose.
Right.
And I said the same thing about the Syracuse basketball game up there. Both teams, deserved to win that game. But,
right.
Obviously only one team can.
Right. And looking at your career, growing up in Albemarle, North Carolina, and obviously back then, you heard games on radio. What kind of sparked your interest in doing what you do now? And obviously it worked out pretty well for you.
Well, I was too small to play football. When I was a sophomore, I was 5'9" and weighed 128 pounds soaking wet. And we had almost a state championship caliber football team. And I knew that I was slow and I was small and that I bled real easily and bruised real easily. But I was smart enough to know that I wanted to do something in football, so I became a manager and a trainer for the 3 years of my sophomore through senior years there. That's where I learned my football basics. And then I kind of forgot about it during college, and then I was working with Goodyear for about 5 years, and moving around. They like to move their people around, so you didn't get too familiar with the clientele at any one place. But then I kind of got tired of that and went back to Albemarle and happened to run into a friend of mine who was manager of one of the radio stations there, and we were talking about broadcasting the football, the high school games that fall. This was in late July, early August. And he said that he was not going to carry him that fall because the man who had been the broadcaster was a freelance broadcaster. He was a businessman, and he had gotten a promotion with his company and couldn't do them. And just somewhere out of the back of my mind, I said, "Oh, I'll do them for you." And he took me up on it, and I went out to do the first game, a West Stanley High School game, with a big old reel-to-reel tape recorder and 2 one-hour reels of tape, a microphone, and 2 kids to spot for me. They were the sons of one of our disc jockeys, and that's how I did my first broadcast. And I listened back to the game the next morning. They had to, being a daytime radio station, we had to tape the games at night and rebroadcast them on Saturday.
Right.
So I got a chance to listen, and I sat there and kind of cringed during the whole thing. And the minute the game ended, my phone rang. And it was the manager of the radio station. He said, "If there's anything I hate, it's a liar." I said, "What do you mean?" he said, you told me that you'd been in South Carolina with Goodyear selling tires and appliances down there working for a radio station doing play-by-play, weren't you? And I said, no. And so anyway, I did it freelance while I was selling insurance that fall. Knew the last time I cut the equipment off and packed it up that I was going to miss it. I really enjoyed it that much, and it worked out to where they needed a disc jockey and a salesperson, and I took that job at the station the next end of February, 1st of March of the next year, and I started doing sports. I did high school baseball, football, basketball, boys and girls, Little League baseball, slow pitch softball, covered golf tournaments, you name it, I did it. If it could make money for the station, I did it. And I did that for 8 years. And then got a chance to go to Durham strictly as a salesman for advertising. And I went there on Labor Day, and the next Sunday night they put me on the air doing a call-in sports talk show for an hour. And I got made some inroads with Duke. They were using a guest color commentator that year for football, former players here and there. And they found out about halfway through the season that didn't work because there was never any cohesiveness or familiarity between the play-by-play man who had started the Duke Radio Network in 1938 and the color man. So they asked me to finish out. I did 4 of the last 5 games and started doing color and basketball. And the play-by-play man had some health issues, had to go in the hospital. I finished out the season, regular season, did the tournament, and did every game of the tournament in Landover, Maryland that year. And I tell people jokingly, I keep showing up every August. They don't run me off, so I guess I've got them fooled again. But this is my 38th full year of doing play-by-play, and like I said, I finished out basketball that first year, but I kind of don't count that since I didn't do football that year. But 433 consecutive football broadcasts. Thankfully, the good Lord's given me good health and all to be able to do every game that I've had scheduled for football in those 38 years.
Well, that's the story of the beginning of a long and legendary broadcasting career. So you've done over 1,200 games, including 4 national title games for basketball and probably too many NCAA games to even count. But we talked a little bit about those Duke-Syracuse games this year a few minutes ago. But what do you think is the best game you've ever called and the best one you've witnessed just as a spectator?
Well, the best, I think it's both the same game, the Duke-Kentucky game in the regional finals in Philadelphia in 1992. Both teams played at such a high level, and there again, both teams deserved to win, but thanks to Christian Laettner making 10 of 10 field goals and 10 of 10 free throws, plus he found time to get a few rebounds as well, and he hit that one, with the clock running out in overtime. A lot of people think, looking back now, that was for the national championship, but it wasn't. It just got Duke into the Final Four that year, which they eventually won. But still, it was just an unbelievable game, and the call that I was lucky enough to make has been played over and over again, and CBS has even used it many times as the voice over their video. Vern Lundquist was doing the game for CBS, and he and I are good friends, and he will jokingly tell people sometimes, hey, I had a good call too, but nobody ever hears mine because of Bob and the great call that he had. So that was, and Christian and I were kibitzing a couple of years ago. He was here for the fantasy camp, and we were just talking. I said, buddy, you and I are linked together for the rest of our lives because of your wonderful ability to make a great shot in a pressure situation, and my good fortune to have a decent call that people still like to hear, at least the Duke fans do. And he looked at me and grinned and popped me on the shoulder with his fist. He says, hey, I don't mind if you don't. I said, well, I certainly don't, because I couldn't have bought any kind of publicity like that shot has gotten me in my career.
Right, and talk a little bit about the book you finished writing, How Sweet It Is, From the Cotton Mill to the Crow's Nest, and forwarded by Coach K, and kind of the relationship that y'all have developed, I guess, over 40 years when you see each other and you do the radio and the coach and been there so long that just talk about that a little bit if you could.
Well, it started out, it took me about 5 years to get it all pulled together, and I really had no plans to write a book, but my wife did. And every time we'd be in a setting with friends or whatever, and I'd tell something that happened on the road or a story about a player or something, I'd invariably get these, you want to write a book? And she would look at me and roll her eyes, and finally I decided to do it, and it was a good thing. I didn't have a publisher. I self-published, and I think that was better because I didn't have a deadline that I had to complete it or, send in drafts and things like that. So I took my time, and I wrote when I wanted to, and if I wanted to go play golf, I went and played golf. But basically, it's just my autobiography. Growing up in a small town of 12,500 people, my dad worked in a cotton mill there for 55 years. I worked 4 summers when I was in high school and college there, and that's where from the cotton mill to the Crow's Nest comes. Crow's Nest, of course, is the press location that we broadcast from in Cameron Indoor Stadium. And I dubbed it that. It wasn't called, I don't know what they called it before I got there, but it wasn't the Crow's Nest. But anyway, it's just, my autobiography about the growing up like that and some of the lessons you learn along the way. And I think one of the things that I really tried to bring out in there was the fact that, sometimes when you make decisions, you really don't know how much effect that's going to have on a certain situation or on your life in general. I know one of the stories I told in there, and this is the absolute truth. I was talking to a lady that I was working with in the cotton mill one day and asked her if she knew a really nice young girl that wouldn't mind going out with me maybe and, see where it led to. And she came in the next day. She said, I found you one. I said, you did? She said, yeah, my daughter wants to. I said, call her tonight. So I did. We set up a date for Saturday night. I went out and picked her up. She lived about 10 miles out of town, and we drove back to town and wanted to go to a movie, but we had seen both the ones that were at the 2 walk-up theaters. You notice I said theaters, not theaters, because that's what we called them in Stanley County. And then we went to the 2 drive-ins, and neither one of those had a movie we wanted to see, and we drove through the drive-in restaurants. We had 3 or 4 of those, and just to see who was there. And finally I looked at her, and I said, well, you got any suggestions? She said, no. How about you? I said, well, we could drive down to South Carolina and get married. And she looked at me like I was crazy as a loon. But about 2 years later, we got married, and this past June we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. And so I think it's going to work.
Yeah, I don't think you can make that one up.
And just other things like telling the station manager at WZKY there in Albemarle, I'll do the games for you. I'd never done any play-by-play before. The closest thing I'd come to it was doing the PA for basketball my senior year in high school, and he took me up, just maybe on a whim, but it worked out. And then coming to Durham to take the job in sales, and that was another decision that has affected the last 39 years of my life. So those things, they have a way of working out. Sometimes you have to wait a little while to get the result of it, but it will eventually work out.
Right.
Well, yeah, it definitely sounds like a book that I'd be interested in reading, and I think anyone who loves the game of college basketball and just some of the great voices and people that work with it, I think anyone should read that book. But before we let you get out of here, Duke is one of the most storied programs, especially in college basketball in the nation. You can argue they're the most historic program in the nation. And me being a guy that likes to sit on the front row at all the basketball games, I love watching the Cameron Crazies. So tell us what makes the Crazies so special, and share with us just your favorite Cameron Crazy story. And keep in mind we have a PG audience out there. So.
Well, thankfully, they have become more PG themselves than they used to be when I first got there. They are a unique bunch, and I think they have been the model for so many student groups in the down through. And I know Pittsburgh has come plain out and said they call themselves the Zoo, and that's just a take off on the Cameron Crazies. Other schools have done the same thing, and it's because I guess TV gave them a lot of publicity. But they are very unique. They are very creative when it comes to their cheers. And it used to be they were really spontaneous. Now they come in. They have a sheet of paper that has information about the opposing players, you know, and maybe a nickname or something that's happened, you know, to them or whatever. And they use that at various times throughout. I guess the one of the best things I've seen there was in 1979. Duke was playing Carolina the last game of the season, and Dean Smith decided, oh, by the way, his birthday's today. He's 83, and happy birthday, Coach. I know you can't hear it, but happy birthday. Great man, great coach. Even though I'd love to, as I told him one time, I said, I'd rather beat you than eat when I'm hungry. And he laughed because I wouldn't expect it any different. But he decided that he was going to play four corners, and until Duke came out of its 2-3 matchup zone. Well, Duke didn't come out of that zone, and they passed the ball around and made a couple of turnovers. They took two shots in the first half. One of them was Rich Yoniker took one from the corner, and then I think it was Dave Colescott took one from outside what would be the three-point line today. And the only thing either one of them touched was the floor when it came down off the arc. They didn't hit rim, net, nothing. And that was the first time I ever heard the chant "airball." And I'm crediting the Duke students with starting that phrase, and we use it a lot now. But that was probably one of the more creative things. There have been a lot of others that borderline on bad taste. I know when one of the NC State players got in trouble with about an automobile when he was introduced. Car keys hit the floor, being thrown out from the students. They threw marshmallows at a rather hefty player from one of the opponents one night. Just a lot of different things like that. But they kind of toned that down. But they're just very vocal, and the crowd for the Syracuse game was vintage. It rivaled any Duke Carolina game crowd that we've had. But they keep things going, and Coach has a pretty good leash on them now, because if they come out with something that's in bad taste, he will make them sit down, and he'll get their attention.
Yeah.
And
right.
So they respect him enough, and that's a good thing.
Right. Well, when the court's named after you.
I worked with Bill Foster 4 years when I first came to Duke, and then Mike came for the 1981 season, and we have been good friends since. And I told him a couple of years ago when I was still doing the hosting of the TV show, I said, Coach, as many questions. I said, I know I ask you more questions in a season than your three daughters put together. And he looked at me and says, yeah, you probably do, but theirs are a lot more intelligent than yours are. So that's the kind of relationship Mike Krzyzewski and I have. And he's a great guy, and people don't see the same Mike Krzyzewski I see. They see Coach K. I see Mike.
Right.
And I know what kind of man he is and what he does for this community, the state of North Carolina, and for basketball in general. He's an unbelievable man, and I'm just proud I can call him my friend.
Right. Well, Mr. Harris, we really appreciate the time this afternoon, and we'll quote by, as long as my health is good, as long as my passion is still for the games, I'm still doing the job Duke needs and wants me to do, and I don't want to retire anytime soon because I have fun doing it. And we hope you don't retire anytime soon, because it's more fun to listen to you than the people on TV. So you really have an art of painting a picture that not many people have. And thanks for the time so much, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for your questions. I can tell you've done your homework. I appreciate that.
Oh, no, thank you for the time. We appreciate it.
Yeah, Bob, thank you again for the time. And with those Cameron Crazy stories with the marshmallows and the car keys, thanks for the ideas for the next basketball game.
I'll try to make sure none of our players are overweight or having problems. But I'll tell you what, let me get a little plug in. VoiceOfTheBlueDevils.com. You can get the book, how sweet it is. I'll even autograph it for you and send it to you.
All right, well thank you. We appreciate that, and we look forward to listening to you next Wednesday. And keep up the great work, as always. The Duke of the Blue, voice of the Duke Blue Devils. So thanks again, Bob. We appreciate it.
You got it. Glad to help.